Salute me! That's an order, Senator JD Vance demanded, pointing at the Royal Guard's chest. The crowd froze as he stepped across the barrier, invading the guard's space. When the guard finally spoke after minutes of provocation, his four-word response wasn't just heard across the palace grounds. It was shared millions of times worldwide, teaching the senator that American authority stops at British soil. Before we reveal the full story, hit the subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The morning mist clung to Buckingham Palace like a gossamer veil, softening the edges of the imposing structure while tourists gathered along the barriers, cameras ready. Among them stood 42-year-old Lance Corporal Malcolm Harrington, his scarlet uniform a vibrant contrast against the gray London sky. For 3 hours, he had maintained perfect stillness, his ceremonial rifle held at precisely the same angle, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the crowd. Tourists often wondered what guards thought about during those long hours of motionless duty. For Malcolm, it was a mixture of battlefield memories from Afghanistan, mental calculations of his daughter's university expenses, and occasionally recipes for the Sunday roast he planned to prepare for his family. 14 years of military service had taught him how to stand perfectly still while his mind remained sharply active. Through his peripheral vision, Malcolm observed the usual tourist behaviors: excited children pointing, teenagers attempting silly poses for photos, adults reading guidebooks about the palace's history. It was predictable, expected, and generally respectful, until the black diplomatic motorcade pulled up. The vehicles arrived with unnecessary speed, tires crunching aggressively against the gravel. Palace staff straightened, recognizing the American flags on the car's hood. The first person to emerge was a young aide, nervously checking her phone while scanning the courtyard. Then came several security personnel, positioning themselves with practiced efficiency. Finally, the rear door opened, and out stepped Senator JD Vance. Even from a distance, Malcolm could read the senator's body language, the dismissive glance at the palace, the impatient adjustment of his suit jacket, the way he ignored the protocol officer attempting to direct him toward the proper entrance. Instead, Vance veered toward the public viewing area, seemingly drawn by the crowd of tourists. "Is that really necessary?" Vance asked loudly, gesturing toward the ceremonial guards as his entourage trailed behind him. Grown men playing dress-up while the world faces actual security threats? His aide, a slim woman with a permanently anxious expression, whispered something, likely reminding him that microphones were potentially everywhere. Vance dismissed her concern with a wave of his hand. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," he continued, voice deliberately projecting to the surrounding tourists. "We spend billions on joint defense, and the Brits waste resources on what? Decorative soldiers?" Several American tourists looked embarrassed, while British visitors exchanged glances of quiet indignation. A mother hurriedly ushered her children away from the developing scene. Malcolm Harrington remained perfectly still, as he'd been trained. The words meant nothing. They were just sound waves traveling through air, unworthy of response or acknowledgement. His duty was to the crown, not to engage with the opinions of visiting politicians, no matter how deliberately provocative. Vance approached the barrier, stopping just on the public side of the rope line. For a moment, he seemed to be observing the guard with genuine curiosity. Then his expression shifted into something more calculated, the face of a man spotting a potential media opportunity. "You know," he announced to nobody in particular, though loudly enough for everyone to hear, "in America, our military focuses on actual combat readiness, not tourist attractions." An elderly British gentleman in a tweed cap stepped forward from the crowd. "Sir, with respect, these men are combat veterans. The ceremonial duty is an honor given to those who've served with distinction." Vance turned toward the man, eyebrows raised. "Is that so? And you know this how?" "Because I commanded men like him in the Falklands," the older man replied quietly. "Before you were born, I expect." For a moment, Vance seemed taken aback. Then his political instincts reasserted themselves. He offered a tight smile and a nod that acknowledged the man without conceding the point. But instead of moving on, he turned his attention back to Malcolm, his expression hardening with new purpose. "Combat veteran or not," Vance said, "there's still a chain of command." Without warning, he stepped over the barrier rope, an explicit violation of palace protocol. Several tourists gasped. A young woman raised her phone to record what was happening. Palace security, stationed discreetly around the perimeter, began moving toward the scene with controlled urgency. Malcolm Harrington remained motionless, though his senses had shifted to high alert. His peripheral vision tracked the senator's approach, noting his stance, his hand positions, assessing potential threat levels through years of combat training. The ceremonial rifle in Malcolm's hands was unloaded, but he'd neutralized threats with less in Helmand Province. Vance positioned himself directly in front of Malcolm, close enough that the guard could feel the senator's breath. This proximity was itself a breach of protocol. Visitors were strictly forbidden from approaching guards this closely, let alone physical contact. "Senator, please return behind the barrier," called a palace security officer, still several paces away. Vance ignored him, his eyes locked on Malcolm's impassive face. "In the U.S. military, we respect rank and elected office," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear clearly. "Our soldiers understand the chain of command extends to civilian leadership." The silence stretched as Malcolm maintained his thousand-yard stare, looking through Vance as if he were invisible. The crowd had grown completely still. All conversation ceased, phones recording from every angle. "I'm a United States Senator," Vance continued, his voice hardening. "I sit on the Armed Services Committee. I've worn the uniform myself." He tapped his chest for emphasis. "So, I think I've earned a basic military courtesy. Still nothing. Malcolm might as well have been carved from stone." "Salute me!" Vance suddenly demanded, pointing directly at the guard's chest. "That's an order!" The crowd collectively held its breath. Palace security officers were now only steps away, but something in the tension of the moment had frozen even them in place. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Seconds stretched like hours. Malcolm Harrington's face remained impassive, his posture perfect, his eyes focused on that distant point beyond the senator's shoulder. Then, with the precision of a man who had performed the same action thousands of times, Malcolm took one step back and brought his ceremonial rifle to port arms position, a formal stance that preceded action. The movement was so unexpected after such perfect stillness that several tourists jumped in surprise. "Sir," Malcolm said, his voice clear and carrying across the now silent courtyard, "this isn't America, Senator." Those 4 words, delivered not with anger or sarcasm, but with the calm certainty of a man stating an irrefutable fact, rippled through the crowd. An American woman near the back actually applauded briefly before catching herself. Vance's face flushed. "Excuse me?" "Royal Guards serve the crown, sir," Malcolm continued in the same measured tone. "Not foreign officials. You are currently in violation of palace security protocol by crossing the barrier and approaching a posted sentry. Please return to the public area immediately." The senator's expression cycled rapidly through shock, anger, and finally, the careful calculation of a man suddenly aware that dozens of cameras were documenting his every reaction. Before he could respond, 2 palace security officers reached his side. "Senator Vance," one said quietly but firmly, "please come with us. The diplomatic entrance is this way." For a moment it seemed Vance might resist further. Then political survival instinct prevailed. He allowed himself to be escorted away, though not before throwing one last glare at Malcolm Harrington, who had already resumed his ceremonial stance, once again motionless as if nothing had occurred. As Vance disappeared inside the palace, the crowd erupted in murmured conversations. Phones lowered as people turned to each other, processing what they'd witnessed. A small child tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, why was that man being mean to the soldier?" "Because some people," the mother replied quietly, "don't understand that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn." By evening, video of the incident had spread across social media platforms worldwide. "This Isn't America" became the top trending hashtag on Twitter. British tabloids ran front-page headlines. "Guard puts U.S. Senator in his place," and "Royal Guardsman schools American politician on British soil." American outlets were more divided in their coverage. Some praised the Guard's professionalism under provocation, while others questioned whether diplomatic courtesy had been violated. Political commentators debated whether Vance had been attempting to create a viral moment or had genuinely misunderstood British military protocol. Inside Buckingham Palace, an altogether different scene was unfolding. The official meeting between British defense officials and the American congressional delegation had proceeded with rehearsed cordiality, though with a noticeable undercurrent of tension. Senator Vance participated minimally, his earlier confidence replaced by a tight-lipped restraint. As the meeting concluded, Sir Robert Blackwood, the aging but sharp-eyed head of palace security, approached Vance with the precise timing of a man accustomed to handling delicate situations. "Senator," he said quietly, "might I have a word in private?" Vance followed Blackwood to a small antechamber off the main meeting room, its walls lined with historical paintings of British military victories. The symbolism was unlikely to be accidental. "I understand there was an unfortunate misunderstanding earlier today," Blackwood began, his aristocratic accent making the words sound more like an observation than an accusation. "If you're expecting an apology," Vance started. "Not at all," Blackwood interrupted smoothly. "I merely thought you might appreciate some context about Lance Corporal Harrington, the guard you encountered." Something in Blackwood's tone gave Vance pause. "Go on." Before his ceremonial posting, Harrington served 3 tours in Afghanistan. During his second deployment, he held position under heavy enemy fire to cover the evacuation of wounded American Marines after an IED struck their vehicle near Sangin. Blackwood allowed this to sink in before continuing. He received the Military Cross for Valor. The U.S. Marine Commander recommended him for your Silver Star, though, of course, as a British soldier, he wasn't eligible. Vance's expression remained neutral, but something shifted behind his eyes. "According to military records," Blackwood continued, "2 of those Marines were from Ohio, your home state, I believe." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "Why are you telling me this?" Vance finally asked. "Because, Senator," Blackwood replied, "I believe in informed perspectives. The men and women who stand guard at Buckingham Palace aren't chosen for their ability to remain still or wear ceremonial uniforms. They're chosen because they've proven themselves in circumstances where discipline means the difference between life and death." Blackwood moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing. Those Marines Harrington helped save? They went home to their families because a British soldier understood that when it truly matters, there is no American or British on the battlefield. There's only doing one's duty, regardless of which flag is on one's uniform." With that, he left Vance alone in the room, surrounded by paintings of battles fought long ago, while a very different kind of defeat settled around him. But the story doesn't end there. What happened next surprised even the most seasoned royal observers. The following morning, as Malcolm Harrington assumed his post for the changing of the guard ceremony, something unprecedented occurred. Senator JD Vance approached, this time remaining respectfully behind the barrier. The crowd, recognizing him from the viral videos, began murmuring immediately, phones rising in anticipation of another confrontation. Instead, Vance stood quietly until the ceremonial ritual concluded. Then, as Harrington assumed his stationary position, the senator raised his hand in a formal military salute, held it for a precise 3 seconds, before lowering it and walking away without a word. The gesture, captured on dozens of phones, spread even faster than the original confrontation. Political analysts debated whether it was genuine remorse or calculated damage control. Military veterans from both countries generally viewed it as an appropriate, if belated, acknowledgement of mutual respect. Lance Corporal Malcolm Harrington never commented publicly on either incident. He continued his ceremonial duties with the same impeccable precision he'd always shown, his eyes fixed on that invisible point beyond the crowds, his thoughts his own. But Palace insiders noted that the following week, a letter arrived for him from the U.S. Marine Corps Command, expressing gratitude for his service alongside American forces years earlier. As for the 4 words that had captured global attention, "This isn't America, Senator," they took on a life of their own. The phrase appeared on T-shirts in London tourist shops. It became shorthand in international diplomacy circles for respecting host nation protocols. British comedians incorporated it into their routines. Even American late-night hosts couldn't resist referencing it when covering stories about cultural misunderstandings. But perhaps the most meaningful impact happened quietly, away from cameras and social media. In military bases across both Britain and America, the incident became a teaching moment about the difference between demanding respect and earning it, about how true authority doesn't come from rank or office, but from understanding that leadership means something different in different contexts. And on ceremonial grounds around the world, tourists began showing a new level of respect for the guards they'd previously seen as photo opportunities. Because now they understood, behind each stoic face and ceremonial uniform stands a person who has likely seen and done things that most civilians can barely imagine. Their silence isn't weakness, it's strength. Their stillness isn't subservience, it's discipline. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one made by saying almost nothing at all. Do you think Senator Vance's salute was sincere or just damage control? How would you have handled the situation if you were in his position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful Royal Guard stories. Don't forget to press the notification bell so you never miss our daily uploads. Share this video with someone who appreciates stories of courage and dignity. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen now. We'll be back tomorrow with another extraordinary tale of service and sacrifice from the men and women who guard the crown.